And so they called me up and said, can you come in Saturday morning when everybody reports to training camp? We're going to come on the air at 5 a.m. Pacific, and we're going to do like 2 hours, right? And we ended up doing 8 hours live, unscripted. But, yeah, it turned into a 13-year run.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday presented by DraftKings. Love those dudes. Love the code Ross at DraftKings or DraftKings Sportsbook. And I love all of you that are trying to get into the best ball draft with me and Joe Dolan. More on that on today's Fantasy Feast podcast. Love today's guest and love the wisdom he imparts on a lot of different levels. It's Andrew Siciliano, the OG for the Red Zone. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
So I guess it's not very often you can say that you did something for the first time with somebody. Oh, wow, maybe I should have used my words a little more carefully there. But
I know where you're going.
I'm talking about preseason NFL games. Yes, I think this is year 6 for me doing the Eagles preseason games, but it all started way back when with the St. Louis Rams with my guy Andrew Siciliano, who's been doing that ever since they became the LA Rams. I don't know if they followed you to LA or you followed them to LA, but you live out there. You've been doing the Rams games for a while. Of course, people know you from the long stints doing the Red Zone on DirecTV and NFL Network, and you got some exciting stuff coming up with the Olympics. But yeah, man, you kind of showed me the preseason ropes way back when.
Ross, what year was that? 2012?
I want to say 2011. I think I did one game because Marshall Faulk couldn't, I want to say. And then the next year, they brought me back for like all the games, I think, in a 3-man booth with Marshall, which was cool. And I want to say the next year, maybe it was Torrey Holt was getting into it, so it might have been Torrey Holt. And I can't remember what happened after that.
Dude, first of all, you were great. Obviously, from day one, we knew you were a natural and you had a bright future doing this, clearly. I remember you and I, because I grew up outside D.C., we shared some Steve Spurrier Washington football team stories back in the day. This is going to be my 14th year doing it, so my first year was 11, so that jives. I remember I was told, oh, Ross Tucker's going to do it. I'm like, oh, that's great. I love Ross. Like, when did he play for the Rams? Like, oh, no, he didn't. We just think he's going to be good. I'm like, yes. And he was. Good to see you.
Well, you know what's funny about that? I played for 5 teams, Andrew. I don't do the preseason games for any of those 5 teams. I do the preseason games for the Eagles, which is cool, though, because I grew up an hour west of Philadelphia. So it's kind of cool because I grew up an Eagles fan. And you can maybe appreciate this, maybe not, because you're not doing anything in D.C. or the Browns. You're doing, obviously, the Rams. But the amount of people who texted me after the first couple of years when I was doing Eagles preseason games and were like, you're really good, man. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. But until I was on their TV, Andrew, during an Eagles game, they didn't watch. They didn't really care. It wasn't their team.
Hey, sports is local, man. When you're on local, when the people you went to high school with can see you, or the people that your folks or your family see at the grocery store or church every day, every week, that kind of brings it full circle. Like, I still have people telling my mother, oh, I remember when Andrew was syndicated on Fox Sports Radio with Tony Bruno on 570 WTEM or 980, whatever it was back then.
Yeah.
My mom's like, he hasn't done that in 20 years, but it was great to see you. You know?
It's awesome. Check him out on social media at Andrew Siciliano. I looked at, obviously before the interview, Andrew, I was looking at through your social a little bit, which is you have an interesting mix, which is what I was expecting. You have some baseball in there, some soccer, obviously some Olympics, which we'll get to. Your pinned tweet says, I got a call in 2011. Could you host for 2 hours? It turned into 13 years. Thank you at NFL Network for a great run. Thank you to every NFL fan. It's been an honor. Can't wait to write the next chapter. I'll see you on NBC Olympics at Peacock in July. So there's a lot there. Let's start with the initial story. Can you host for 2 hours? It turns into 13 years.
Yeah, so that was the end of the lockout 2011. So backstory, I'd been doing the Red Zone channel. We brought that to TV and launched that back in 2005 at DirecTV. And then this is 2011, 6 years later. The lockout is ending. You remember the summer of 11? Were you still playing? No, you had just retired, right?
Yep.
Summer of 11? Right. So 2011, the lockout ends, and NFL Network basically, they were going to staff all 32 teams. So they sent a host or a reporter everywhere, and they didn't have anyone in studio left, basically. And so they called me up and said, can you come in Saturday morning when everybody reports to training camp? We're going to come on the air at 5 a.m. Pacific, and we're going to do like 2 hours, right? And then we'll probably just wheel it, TV term, by the way, wheeling, as you know, Ross, for taking something on tape and continuing to re-air it all afternoon. I said, sure. And I went in there, and that was the day that Vince Young said dream team. And that was the day Peyton Manning showed up in Anderson, Indiana with the big neck brace. And that was, look, there were countless things that happened because nobody had been in a building in 6 months for the lockout or during the lockout. And we ended up doing 8 hours live, unscripted. And they came back and said, hey, can you do it again tomorrow? And I said, sure. And we did 8 more hours going around all 32 teams. And then, a couple of days later, they offered me a job and said, you want to host NFL Total Access this year? And I was like, excuse me? Sure. That was when Rich was transitioning off the show. Kara Henderson, my dear friend, I didn't know her at the time, now known as Kara Sneed. She had already been in place as one of the hosts, and they needed a second host. They wanted a 2-person show, and they said, you want to do that? And I was like, okay, of course. That's not what I expected. But yeah, it turned into a 13-year run.
That is awesome. Especially the fact that you rolled for 8 hours, back-to-back days by yourself. I don't think that many people know how hard that is to do, like going to remote sites, because you thought it was 2 hours and ended up being 8.
Yeah.
They were telling you in your ear a lot, like where to go next and what you were doing, which is one of the hardest things to do in the industry. That's awesome. Man, it's interesting because obviously your time there has come on, like a lot of people reportedly, and then even just more recently, it came out that the podcast I know you and I have both been on around the NFL, that's going to look different. There's a lot of changes at NFL Network over the last year or so, Andrew. Any reason in particular in your mind?
Wow, that's a whole nother podcast we can go down. I don't look. I have a lot of good friends there, and I know they're getting ready for a new season. Obviously, there have been a lot of changes here. I love the people that work there. I love the people that I worked there with that are no longer there. It was a dream job, honestly, and I don't have a bad word to say. I know that, like, for example, Dan Hanzus and Mark Sessler, who you just mentioned around the NFL guys, that they're going to launch something new. I'm certain, and they're going to be amazing. The people that are still there, Rich and Mooch and Kurt and that whole Game Day Morning crew and Tom and Ian and Mike on the Insiders and the new look GMFB, whether it's going to be in LA with all the new faces or wherever and whatever. I was a fan, Ross, of the network before, and that's really what made that day so easy in 2011, is that all these people I was tossing to out in the field with the 32 teams, I had watched every day, right, for years. I mean, Total Access was like the one show, along with Jeopardy, that I had in my DVR every night to auto-record. So those people, a lot of them are still there. Steve White, Stacey Dales, most notably. And I know they're going to keep doing great work.
Well, and you... classy answer and very classy post, not surprising. Before we get to what you're doing for the Olympics, because it's a gold zone show for Peacock, which is awesome, you mentioned it in passing. You're the OG Red Zone guy. Like, you're the OG. You were doing it for years before NFL Network launched their own channel, and of course, a lot of people know that now. And Scott Hansen does a terrific job doing that. And both of you guys were doing it at the same time for a good chunk of change. How many years was that? That must have been 17, 18 years, something like that?
So we did 18 years. We launched it in 2005 at DirecTV with Eric Shanks, who now runs Fox Sports, obviously, James Crittenden, Jonathan X, all in the control room. I was the host. We shot it at Fox initially because Fox, at that point, owned DirecTV, and so we launched it on Stage B at the lot at Fox. I know you've been there. It was the stage that at the time the Best Damn Sports Show period was on, and then JB and Howie and Terry and all them were in the room next door on Stage A. So we did it 2005. NFL Network launched theirs, I think maybe 6 years later. But we ended up doing 18 years and over 300 shows, and it was a great run, man. It was like, talk about dream jobs. Like, honestly, Ross, I was the luckiest guy in the world. I had a job. Now, I mean, DirecTV came first, but when I was at both, I had a job Monday through Friday in which I would come on the air at NFL Network and do 2-3 hours every day, all the news, everything, right? And that job, Monday through Friday, got me ready for my job on Sunday. People always say, well, how do you get ready on Sunday? I'm like, my other job. Because I talk this all week, and then Sunday, by the time you get to Sunday, it's like riding a bike. And then you come in again on Monday, you're like, well, you saw every game for 8 hours on Sunday. So now Monday's a layup. We had a really, really, really good run, and the people at DirecTV, David Hill, really, who came up with the idea from Italian soccer, Serie A soccer, which is where the whole thing came from. They deserve credit for changing sports television. I don't think that's hyperbole, because that show turned into MLB Extra Innings. Not Extra Innings, I'm sorry, Strike Zone, which we did at DirecTV at one point as well, turned into an EPL show, turned into every sport now has a kind of whip-around platform.
Including the Olympics,
yes,
which we're going to get to momentarily. It's I gotta tell you, so I went right from playing, Andrew, into like starting to call games at my alma mater, and then I was doing NFL games on the radio pretty much that first year for Sports USA Radio. So I had never really
Tell Larry Kahn I said hi.
What's that?
Tell Larry Kahn I said hi.
There you go. Yeah, I wasn't really a red zone guy because I was never home. You know, I was always doing a game, a Sunday 1 or a Sunday 4. So once Westwood One decided to no longer do Sunday afternoon games and they only did primetime games, I no longer had a Sunday 1 or 4 o'clock gig. And I had done that for a bunch of years. That's when I first started doing a red zone. And I've got cable here at my house and Comcast, so I wasn't a DirecTV guy, so I added the red zone channel. It's such a good product, man. I mean, it is, especially if you want to know what's going on with all the different games and you want to be able to, you know, like for me, I had to talk about it Monday morning on Sirius XM. I had to talk about it Monday on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. I had to have a pretty good feel for all of the games, and that was the best way to go about it. And now you get to do it Olympic style. I'm curious as to what events it'll be, when you'll be doing it, because I think that's a really cool way for them to do the Olympics. Tell me a little bit more about your upcoming gig with Peacock.
Honestly, Ross, I couldn't be more excited. And by the way, Scott's going to be doing this as well. We're going to go 10 hours a day on Peacock. I got a few hours. He's got a few hours. It's going to be any and everything going on in Paris. So this is the third time I've done it. We actually launched this in 2014 for the Sochi game. So right after the Peyton and Seattle Super Bowl in New York, Sochi started next week, the winter game. So I went from New York up to Stamford, Connecticut. That's where NBC's big facility is. And we did it for the winter games in 14. Now, full disclosure, I don't know how many people watched it. It was like on NBCOlympics.com or whatever the platform was at the time that it was only online. Because the thinking back then was, hey, protect the 8 o'clock Eastern time primetime window. You want to keep that stuff. You want to kind of embargo, TV term for not give away the results before. I mean, Twitter had taken off, X had taken off, but we were still living in a world in which people didn't watch live highlights, live events on their phone, right? So we could only do so much. Then we did it again for Rio in 2016, and you kind of got a little bit more. This year, obviously, streaming's a thing. I mean, it's of course it's a thing. So it's going to be 10 hours a day on Peacock every stinking day of the Olympics. So from, I believe, 7 a.m. Eastern in the morning to 5 p.m. Eastern in the afternoon. That's 10 hours, right? 10 hours. If it's happening in Paris, you're going to see it. So it is a 10-hour daily red zone, gold zone, every single day of competition. So whether it's Team USA basketball, whether it's gymnastics, whether it's judo, whether it's surfing, which, by the way, is going to be in the South Pacific, not actually in Paris, obviously. Whether it's breaking. Do you know that breaking, like breakdancing, is an event this year?
No.
True.
I have no idea, but
we're going to hand out medals.
I'm glad you guys are splitting it, because 10 hours every day for
it's
2
weeks
long.
or
3 weeks, whatever it is, that would not be sustainable.
Well, there are 10,000 athletes. Like for a preseason game, you got 180 players, right? That's brutal. You know, like 35, 40 of them aren't going to play, so you really don't have to know that much about them. You know, I mean, they're big names anyway. This is 10,000 athletes in 39 sports.
And different countries with different pronunciations.
Yes.
What's the prep like for that?
Oh, my gosh. So NBC Research, and I'm not just kissing their rears because we have to, they're amazing. And, I mean, I have dozens of PDFs in my computer for every one of those 39 sports, including, like, 3-on-3 basketball and badminton and just ridiculous stuff, obviously. The way that I've done it, and I just got off of Zoom kind of trying to plan out, is like, all right, so let's say we're on for 4 hours today. Here are the events in the 4-hour window that I know we're going to go to, right? And in each of these events, or I know we could possibly go to, I know there's competition in this block. So here are the Americans we got to know. Here are the international competitors with the biggest names and the best chance of winning today. Here are the medals potentially on the line. Here's where the world records are. Here's maybe the greatest American in this sport or the American record holder in this event. And you kind of get a one sheet for everything. And then you just grab that one sheet, and with each passing day, no matter how much research you put in, you can't learn 10,000 athletes, right? How much work. So with each passing day, it gets a little more easier, and then you have more anecdotal stuff from like the day before. Hey, well, in the prelims yesterday, we saw this, right? Or this guy fell yesterday, or this athlete has this backstory. And by the time you get to week number 2, it's kind of like riding a bike. And I love it, honestly. Like, I'm an Olympics fan. I can't wait for it to be in our own backyard in 28 here. I'm in L.A. I think the average fan just kind of wakes up to it in July because they're on summer vacation. Maybe they're following their favorite baseball team or whatever. It's not front and center. And so I feel like so much of it is teaching, or not necessarily teaching, helping the average fan learn and kind of welcome them into the tent, because they're going to love these athletes and their stories once they actually see the competition.
Shout out Ron Vaccaro and the NBC research team. That's going to be awesome. You mentioned preseason games. That's also coming up for both of us. You've been doing the Rams, you said, since 2011. I got to be honest with you, I was on the sideline for that Rams-Lions playoff game last year, which was epic, by the way, in Detroit, the atmosphere and the whole game. The Rams were so much better last year than I thought they were going to be. I mean, I thought they were going to be bad. I think you could argue last year was a better coaching job for McVay than maybe even the year they won the Super Bowl. I was really impressed by the way they play.
And Sean will tell you, Ross, that he had as much fun last year as maybe any year, and it was the rejuvenation that he needed. He's been a different guy, I think, the last 18 months with that rejuvenation. Nobody expected anything, especially defensively. You know that. No one expected anything from that defense. And obviously this year they don't have Aaron Donald. But they went out and they got the 2 Florida State kids at the top of the draft. I think the low-key piece here is Tre'Davious White, if he could work his way back, or Cam Curl from Washington. or Cam Kitchens they drafted from Miami at safety. So a couple of new safeties back there with John Johnson III re-signing last week as well. What does Chris Shula's defense look like this year? We'll see night number 1 against Detroit again, in Detroit again on NBC on Sunday night. I think, matter of fact, I know they have high expectations. They think this team can be good, really good. If they can keep him upright, if they could run the ball, more of a gap scheme than a zone last year, they played some power football and it worked. They love their backfield, so they think they're going to be good again.
There's a lot there. It's interesting. Their O-line played really well last year. I had Greg Cosell recently say he thinks Matthew Stafford's the best quarterback in the NFC, which I was impressed by. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, when they're both healthy at the same time, I mean, that is legit. It's funny. Last year I called them the one-name defense, like the old Miami Dolphins no-name defense. Last year they were the one-name defense. The only person anybody knew was Aaron Donald. But this year now they've got a couple guys you heard of last year, and then they've got even more guys coming with the Florida State guys, who I love, by the way, because the one played at Albany, the other one played at Western Michigan, and then they transferred to Florida State, and now they're big prospects. So it'll be awesome to watch. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to watching you on the Gold Zone on Peacock. I love, Andrew, I'm not going to say I love the Olympics, but I am 1,000% more interested in any sport when you're representing your country, right? So like the Copa or the Euros or any of these, I don't care about those professional leagues over there at all. But when they're repping the countries and I see how much the fans care, then I care.
Absolutely. And when you see Simone Biles come back and you see the Olympic trials in Minnesota for the gymnastics team and you see how much they care, or Caleb Dressel coming back and how much everyone cares, Katie Ledecky going for even more golds in the pool, or the track and field. I don't know if you're watching, Ross, on Netflix, this new kind of behind the scenes, what Hard Knocks, whatever you want to call it, all the behind the scenes docs with Noah Lyles and Ja'Carri Richardson and the Diamond League and the sprinters. Have you caught that?
No, I heard about it, but I haven't watched it.
Like when you learn their stories and you see how badass they are, believe me, it's going to be an amazing 3 weeks in Paris.
Love it. Can't wait. Check him out on social media at Andrew Siciliano. That way you can also make sure you know on how to check him out, Peacock Gold Zone. Thank you, Andrew.
You got it, Ross. Good to see you, man.
Awesome stuff with Andrew. Speaking of awesome stuff, Labatt Blue Light. Drink some of those bad boys with your friends. Live life to the power of we. If you want to take things to the next level, always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. The Chicago Bears, they signed 2 rookies by name of Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze to fully guaranteed 4-year deals.
So the only thing that's interesting about that is the last couple of days, there have been all these comments about Caleb Williams said, he wasn't handling his contract, but he doesn't have a registered agent. And so who is it and what's going on? And then they sign and nobody cares. That's how it works. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And they sign and nobody cares.
The Commanders, they add former Panthers GM Scott Fitterer to their front office.
I don't really care about this. What I do think is always interesting is you get one chance to be a GM, and you're the GM for David Tepper in Carolina, and who knows how many of those decisions Fitterer made and how many of those decisions David Tepper made, right? So you might get fired based on primarily on the decisions of the owner. Although, you know what? A lot of the stuff, line and stuff didn't work out. I'm pretty sure that wasn't Tepper. Even if Tepper said, I want Bryce Young and not CJ Stroud, that might not have been the same with some of the other picks.
The Cleveland Browns, they agreed to a 3-year deal with kicker Dustin Hopkins.
Dude, kickers are making $5 or $6 million a year now. Good for those guys. You know how I feel. I'm not a huge fan of kicking, but I do like kickers, and I think they're worth it. I think that's actually my beef with kicking is they're too worth it, but I think they are worth it. Think about Jake Elliott for the Eagles. I mean, these Justin Tucker, these clutch kickers make a big, big difference.
Some wideout news. 49ers wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, he requested a trade, and the Texans, they signed wide receiver Quintez Cephas.
Cephas was one of the betting guys, right? I think he was one of the betting guys that was in Detroit. If he's not, I apologize, Quintez. As for Ayuk's an interesting one because I don't know how many other teams are dying to give Ayuk the money he thinks he's worth. I'm not sure there are a bunch. And certainly probably not willing to give up a draft pick to give him the money he wants. That's something to keep an eye on. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Best gift you could ever give anyone, period. Just got an email yesterday, by the way, from one of you guys that got it for a family member. I love it. myfrontpagestory.com. You will get a signed autograph in the mail. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.